My younger brother tried to steal the house my grandfather left me. Now, he's homeless and I'm charging my parents rent to live in it. Eric, my younger brother, is 28M, and I am 35M. If favoritism was so blatant in our home while I was growing up that it was painful. My parents behaved as though Eric was a priceless treasure that had to be safeguarded at all costs from the moment of his birth, while I was just there. I still recall my 10th birthday celebration being cancelled due to Eric's cold. They couldn't risk him feeling excluded from the festivities because he only had a cold, not even a fever. As we aged, things only got worse. I was the debate team captain, a straight-A student, and even received a partial scholarship for my SAT results. My parents, however, hardly noticed. They were too preoccupied in complimenting Eric on passing his classes with C grades. The same thing happened at every parent-teacher conference. They would ignore my accomplishments and concentrate on how they could support Eric in doing better. At the age of 18, I moved away with the intention of succeeding without their continual comparison. I earned a degree in computer science, worked several jobs to pay for education, and got a fantastic position at a software business. I met my wife, Darla, 33F, there. She is intelligent, kind, and, in contrast to my family, she genuinely acknowledges my accomplishments. James is our 1-year-old kid, and we were married 5 years ago. Eric, however, never left the house. After 1 semester, he left community college because it was too stressful, and returned home. At the age of 28, he continues to live with our parents and works part-time at a nearby video game store. He spends much of his time playing video games. This is entirely made possible by my parents. They cover all of his expenses, including his meals, bills, auto insurance, and game subscriptions. My mother literally broke down in tears when I suggested that Eric might want to look for a full-time job, saying that I was being too harsh on her sensitive little boy. We threw James's first birthday celebration at my parents' place last month. They insisted, even though I didn't want to. Mom remarked that being a part of his nephew's special day would mean a lot to Eric. In an attempt to maintain harmony, I accepted even though I should have known better. The celebration got off to a decent start. We used streamers and balloons to adorn the garden. James was enjoying himself greatly in the company of his loved ones. Up until lunchtime, everything was going smoothly. I was searching the crowd for Darla after stuffing my plate full of food. At that moment, it occurred. Eric was standing just behind me as I turned around and unintentionally ran into him. His new limited edition gaming t-shirt got some of my food, which was pasta with marinara sauce on it. Since I understood that gaming gear can be pricey, I instantly apologized and offered to buy him a new shirt or even pay for dry cleaning. Eric flipped out rather than accept my apology. He began to yell that I always ruin everything for him as his face flushed. He cited instances from our early years when he claimed that I intentionally attempted to harm him, such as when I broke his game console by tripping over its wire. I was 12, he was 5, or when I received the last piece of pizza at his 10th birthday celebration. I hadn't eaten all day because I was helping set up his party. The room fell silent. We had everyone's attention. Eric gave me a forceful slap across the face before I could fight myself. The room was silent as the sound reverberated. My cheek ached, but the next thing that transpired hurt even more. My mother hurried over to fuss over Eric, not to see how I was doing. She began to inquire about his well-being and whether he required ice for his hand after he slapped me. As though I had done something wrong, my dad simply stood there with his arms crossed and gave me a disapproving look. I surveyed the space. James, who had begun to weep from the chaos, was being held by my wife, who was standing there in shock. While some people glanced away awkwardly, others murmured to each other. I stood there with a red mark on my cheek, and there was Eric, being comforted by our mother. I asked my parents whether they truly approved of their son being beaten at his own child's birthday celebration when I had finally found my voice. My mother's reaction? "You're older, you should know better. Look what you did to his new shirt. You know how much he loves his gaming merchandise, he's saved up for weeks to buy that." I lost it at that point. Years of repressed annoyance were released. I told them that throughout his life, they had allowed Eric to act in this way. They had never reprimanded him, encouraged him to improve, or held him responsible for anything. I brought up the fact that, at 28, he was still living at home and playing video games, when I had put a lot of effort into building my life since I was 18. I explained that Eric had a gaming tournament that day, thus they had missed my college graduation. How they were so preoccupied with making sure Eric didn't feel excluded that they hardly assisted with my wedding. How Eric felt uncomfortable around infants, thus they had only been to see James twice since he was born. If I couldn't respect my brother, my dad became irate and urged me to leave their home. That's exactly what I did. I told my wife we were going, scooped up my son, and left. "Look how upset Eric is now," was the reason my mother broke down in tears, not the fact that I was going. The calls and messages began to come in later that day. I had to apologize to Eric, my parents informed me over the phone. He apparently locked himself in his room and wouldn't go because he was so unhappy about his damaged shirt. Some family members called to let me know that I should have recognized Eric's sensitivity and refrained from provoking him by spilling food on him. According to other texts, I was being dramatic about a little slap, and should be more understanding because I'm the older brother. Eric, my parents, and the family members who stood up for him were all blocked by me. Some relatives who were present at the time of the incident expressed their support for me, stating that they had always seen how unfairly I was treated but had refrained from speaking out to prevent creating a scene. Too late, too little. Now, a month has passed. My wife completely agrees with my decision to cut off communication. She stated that she never wants James to believe that hitting people is acceptable or that he must put up with abuse because it originates from his family. Some family members claim that since Eric is my younger brother, I should forgive him and I am being too harsh. However, I fail to see why, simply because we are related, I should continue to put up with mistreatment. First update, I haven't communicated with my family in 2 years. The absence of their incessant drama has brought tranquility to life. At 3 years old, James is doing well. In addition, we have a 6-month-old daughter named Emma. In addition to purchasing a larger home and receiving advancements at work, Darla and I have been content with our lives as a family of 4. Everything changed last week when I received a call from an unidentified number. My mother was crying uncontrollably. Her cries made it difficult for me to grasp what she was saying at first. I was shocked by what I heard when she eventually relaxed enough to talk. Eric was selling their house after somehow getting it transferred into his name. They had been given 2 weeks to vacate by him. There was nowhere for them to go. But the biggest shock wasn't even that. I was stunned to learn that the house had truly always been in my name. Mom says my grandfather left the house to me in his will when he died 15 years ago. I had just started college at the age of 20. Due to their own plans, my parents never disclosed this inheritance to me. In an attempt to persuade me to give the house to Eric when he was more stable, they had been waiting for the right time to tell me that they wanted Eric to ultimately own it. They resided in my house for 15 years without claiming it as their own. They allowed Eric to live there for free for 15 years while I worked several jobs to pay for my own place. While they saw me struggle to save for a down payment on my first home, they kept this a secret for 15 years. Mom started sobbing as she talked about how they never imagined Eric would turn on them in this way. He had been behaving oddly for several months, apparently. He had begun discussing moving to a different state to live with some buddies who played online games. They required funds for streaming equipment and a game setup. At that point, he began inquiring about who owned the residence. How Eric was able to get the house registered in his name is still a mystery to me. He took care of the paperwork during their trip last month, according to Mom, who kept saying it. I can only presume he falsified my signature because I never signed any transfer forms. The situation's irony is nearly comical. Since the house was genuinely mine, the same parents who evicted me from their home 2 years ago are now pleading with me for assistance. The brother who attacked me my son's birthday celebration has now betrayed them by attempting to take my belongings. Mom talked on the phone for an hour about how they were going to be homeless and that they had nowhere else to go because they had spent all of their savings on Eric over the years, including paying for his failed college attempt, purchasing his gaming gear, paying for his insurance and car payments, and even paying for his convention attendance. She also disclosed that Eric's behavior worsened after I stopped communicating with him. He declared he was going to become a professional gamer and completely quit his job. He played games all day and streamed to his modest internet fanbase at night. He would have tantrums, smash things, and threaten to move out when they suggested he look for a job. My father also picked up the phone. He attempted to defend their conduct by claiming that they just had their 2 sons' best interests in mind, that they had intended to ultimately notify me about the bequest, and that they never imagined Eric would act in such a way. He even went so far as to suggest that perhaps none of this would have occurred if I had kept in touch. Without saying anything, I hung up. I received more calls from different family members pleading with me to assist my parents. Some people made an effort to guilt-trip me by bringing up their advanced age and vulnerability. Others said I was being just as evil as Eric by not helping them. Darla believes that since they are still my parents and appear to sincerely regret their situation, we ought to assist them, but I find it difficult to sympathize. For 15 years, they misled me about my own property. While I put a lot of effort into purchasing my own home, they let their golden child to reside there for free. When he attacked me in front of my family, they stood up for him. The only reason they contacted me now was to ask for something. To find out how Eric was able to get the house in his name, I got in touch with a lawyer. The attorney attested to the fact that my grandfather's will did, in fact, leave me the house. Because I never signed any transfer forms, She is investigating the documents Eric used to transfer the property and concludes that his claim to the house would not stand up in court. She added that we could file a lawsuit against him for forgery. I'm unsure right now. Since my parents are still my parents in spite of everything, I have a part of me that wants to help them. However, I also believe that they deserve this because they deceived me and allowed Eric to continue doing so for so long. Perhaps this is the wake-up call they've been waiting for to realize the true nature of their beloved golden child. First update. Although it wasn't simple, my lawyer assisted me in regaining the residence. Yes, Eric had falsified my signature on a number of documents. Additionally, he falsely claimed to have my power of attorney while lying to other agencies. After nearly 3 months of legal proceedings, Eric has been evicted and the house is once again in my name. I gained additional knowledge regarding what truly transpired during the court processes. For months, Eric had been organizing this. He had discovered my grandfather's will while searching through our parents' old papers. He began looking into ways to transfer property ownership after realizing the house was legally mine. He even used a fictitious name to join some internet communities on real estate fraud. The quality of the fake documents was very high. According to my attorney, Eric ought to have had assistance from a property law expert. Later on, we discovered that he had been using money he borrowed from our parents to pay an internet consultant, claiming the money was for gaming equipment. Eric lost it all when the police arrived to evict him. He locked himself in his room and wouldn't leave? After hours of haggling, he eventually agreed to go when the door was threatened to be broken. He would not stop yelling that we were all out to destroy his life and that everyone was against him. I was urged by my parents to allow them to remain in the house. After obtaining my location from a family member, they arrived at my house and genuinely collapsed in that they have nowhere else to go, Mom said, sobbing. Dad was crying, something I had never seen him do before, and he was apologizing for keeping the truth about my inheritance a secret. They acknowledged that they had used up all of their retirement funds on Eric, including loans they had taken out to finance his gaming career, costly gaming settings, car payments, insurance, and the tuition for the 1 semester he attended college. They had genuinely thought that one day he would succeed as a streamer and repay them. At last, Dad acknowledged that they had overindulged Eric. He claimed that over the years, they had observed indications of his manipulative behavior but had consistently made excuses for him. They believed he would eventually mature and become responsible if they provided him with adequate time, resources, and support. Mom disclosed the ways in which Eric had deceived them on the house transfer. He had persuaded them that it was merely a formality to assist him in launching a gaming company. He assured them that after he became a successful streamer, he would look after them forever. They wanted to be sure their baby boy wouldn't turn on them, so they trusted him. Darla and I talked it over, and I agreed to let them stay under certain restrictions. In order to remind them that they are living in my home, they must first pay rent, which is not market rate because they are now on a fixed income. Second, if they wish to have any kind of contact with me or their grandchildren, they must go to family therapy. Third, without my express consent, they are never allowed to enter the house. The eviction was not well received by Eric. He began threatening everyone, including Darla, our parents, and myself. He accused me of turning our parents against him and wrecking his life. Since it was his home, and he had nowhere else to go, he insisted that I allow him to return. I kept all of his threatening messages in case we needed them later, and I banned his number. Eric was couch surfing at his gaming pals' houses when I last heard from him. His ambitious intentions to move in with his online pals apparently fell through when they discovered he was broke. Since he is my brother, other family members advised me to assist him, but I declined. He attempted to use forgeries and fraud to steal my residence. In my opinion, he is no longer my brother. Third update. It has been an interesting 6 months. As agreed upon, my parents have been going to therapy and paying their rent on time. Although it's a gradual process, they are attempting to mend our friendship. There are fresh disclosures every week regarding the various ways in which their partiality harmed both of their boys. At last, Mom acknowledged that they felt bad for allowing Eric. It seems that they were having financial difficulties when Eric was born, so they were unable to provide him with the same luxuries that I enjoyed throughout my early years. They began to overindulge him in order to make up for it. What began as purchasing him additional toys evolved into a lifetime of condoning misbehavior. During one therapy session, Dad lost it when he saw how their behavior made Eric into an entitled monster and drove me away. He acknowledged that they secretly knew I would be alright because I was a responsible and diligent worker. They therefore gave Eric their whole attention because they believed he required greater support to thrive in life. Eric wrote me a long email last month. He asserted that he had also been going to therapy and had come to terms with his errors. He claims that after being evicted, he reached his lowest point. His streaming career never took off, and none of his gaming pals wanted to take him in permanently. He currently shares an apartment with 3 roommates and works at a warehouse. Eric apologized in the email for everything, trying to steal the house, faking my signature, and assaulting James on his birthday. He claimed that treatment enabled him to see how his perspective of the world had been distorted by his parents' partiality. He promised to pay the rent this time and asked if he may live with our parents again. I turned down his request. I sent the email to my attorney, who suggested that I stop communicating with him because of his track record of deceit and deception. Even though I inherited the house, I worked hard to obtain everything else in my life. Even if he says he has changed, I will no longer tolerate his behavior. I continue to face criticism from some family members for charging my elderly parents rent. They claim that I'm being unkind and that families ought to provide unpaid support to one another. However, this is about boundaries and consequences, not money. My parents only expressed regret when they wanted something from me, allowed my brother to be abused, and concealed my inheritance for 15 years. They're fortunate that I'm allowing them to remain at all. Mom still occasionally remarks about Eric's difficulties. She said last week that he might lose his car because he couldn't afford his car payment. I quickly put an end to that by telling her that he is an adult who attempted to defraud me out of my house. If they wish to, they can assist him, but not while residing in my home. Darla says we should ask them to dinner occasionally so they can see their grandchildren, but she believes I'm being fair. Every now and then, James inquires about his grandparents. I'm thinking about it, but I'm not yet prepared for frequent family get-togethers. The treachery is still too recent. This setup works for the time being. I have authority over my property, my parents have a secure place to live, and Eric is at last coming to terms with the repercussions of his behavior. Clear limits and punishments can sometimes improve family relationships. I've discovered that being family does not entail being exploited by others. It entails respecting one another's limits and being accountable to one another. The conclusion.